in SLG that I work with that are basically getting Office 365. When they get Office 365, they have this identity requirement where they want to present single sign-on to their end users. At the same time, they may not have the perfect network, the perfect environment on-premise, and they don't want to have any outages. So we make Office 365 highly available. It has all these capabilities for resiliency, but if they if the customer implements single sign-on and their connection to the internet goes down, they lose connectivity to Office 365 because their identities don't replicate, their ADFS environment goes away. And so you can definitely do two different ways to synchronize Office 365 with identity. One includes the password and the other one is single sign-on with ADFS. And so the Azure Foundation came from that because in the state of Texas and New Mexico and Colorado and Louisiana where I work, we've basically implemented this exact same solution 30 times in the last year. So what I wanted to do is help expand our partnership with customers and our business partners to say, let's implement a prescribed Azure Foundation so that not only do you get identity, but you also get all of your capabilities for future workloads in Azure. So it's kind of like a good investment to get a good carrot to say we get single sign-on, but it's also a nice investment to say you're going to get secure single sign-on. So with that, the first step is I put all this stuff out there. We've really, as a company, I think we've really opened up about our sharing IP. So we've developed a lot of IP that my peers use when we go out to the field. I've made all that IP available in this GitHub repository. I put a link to it in the chat window. It's github.com/willst and then /Azure Foundation. And so there's some presentations in there, and the three presentations we'll walk through is the Azure Foundation working deck, which is what you guys can use as partners or as customers to understand what Azure Foundation is and why you might want to use it. There's a quick data sheet that we've made available to partners to modify, put your logo on, and help you if you get opportunities to present that we know what the Azure Foundation is. I also have a weekly office hours for partners and customers to join and basically ask questions about how to implement Azure Foundation. And then the last one is the price sheet. So maybe the first place to start is with the presentation and the overview. Or actually, I'm going to start with the data sheet because it's really the four pillars of the Azure Foundation. Is that when you get Azure, one of the first concerns you have is governance and how are you going to control your spend in Azure. So with the financial setup, you guys get an enterprise admin portal. You get the ability to have Power BI reporting and a dashboard. But if you don't categorize your workloads correctly, that dashboard may just be a bunch of numbers that don't equate to the workload that you were expecting to have. So we present when we go through the foundation, you'll see how we segregate workloads and how we categorize where spend is being done in Azure. Your hybrid connectivity. So to get domain controllers and to get identity in Azure, you have to have a replica of your domain controllers on premise. So getting a nice robust connection from on-premise to Azure is part of the pattern, and doing it in a secure way is this next pillar of trust. And we want to make sure that when people put workloads in Azure, they don't inadvertently expose those workloads when they didn't mean to. So a lot of your traditional policies and procedures about DMZs and what systems can get access from the internet directly extend through with how we lay down the network. And then the benefit of single sign-on, the benefit of saying, I'm going to put Azure Active Directory connect and have a ADFS environment with single sign-on and really give that full robust identity pattern that's available whether you're at a Starbucks or whether you're on campus, and you get the benefits of that. And then the next slide of it is just kind of why you would use Azure at all. You know, just our web applications, our cloud storage, our big data, our mobile, our media. And what the Azure Foundation does is it allows you to get identity out there, but it allows you to also define the metadata around how do you enable yourself to put these other workloads out there in the future. So with that, the other presentation is the working deck, and this working deck is everything, right? It kind of goes through what your value proposition is, what your prerequisites are as a new enrollment. We give you some common missteps that you can make if you're a new customer to Azure that you might want to avoid. Why security is important. What the overview of the Azure Foundation is, and one of the things that's really key about the architectural overview is that we've spent a lot of time since 1995 until now defining how we do data centers. And now that you don't have to plug in cables anymore and you can just really look at Azure as a greenfield data center for you, we kind of take all those best practices and put them in a configuration template that you get to use for literally, a 2-week engagement would have been probably a 18-month consulting gig to stand up your new data center. So it's really accelerated getting a nice greenfield environment set up the way that you would expect it to be. So application innovation, data intelligence, open and flexibility, and trust. These are the 4 pillars that Microsoft wants everyone to understand is how our cloud's different than other clouds. We're going to have great capabilities in SaaS and PaaS. Our IaaS is on par with anyone's if you look at Gartner. Our data and intelligence services for SQL Server, SQL PaaS, cognitive services, and then our embracing of the open community, Linux, Red Hat, Chef, Puppet, all these capabilities are available in our cloud. And then the biggest thing in state and local government, in my opinion, is this trust factor. Is that we have a government cloud that is better than anyone else's government cloud, if I could say that. I think Gartner would agree with me. And we don't just say it's the best, but we prove it with our auditing, compliance reports, our trust center, our ability to help you or you as a customer or you as a partner pass your audits inside. So if you have a PCI audit that you got to pass, or if you have a CGIS audit you got to pass, we do a lot of the heavy lifting for you to give you all the things that you would have had to do in your data center. We give those reports to you to build your back to your stakeholders, and in addition, we provide all the blueprints that you would want to have to say, hey, I built CGIS compliance data into my design. So these enrollment prerequisites, to make it so that it's repeatable. A lot of people kind of dip their toes into Azure and say, oh, we'll sign like a Class B or a Class C IP address, and we'll have 254 subnets or IP addresses, and we'll call that Azure. And what we're saying is kind of just opening that up. IP addresses are free. When we do IPv6, none of this may matter anymore, but as long as people are embracing IPv4, we take this Class B/16 IP space and we carve it into 4 different data centers. Azure's out there, and we deploy Azure in pairs. And when we do that, what we do is we say Iowa and Virginia are our 2 data centers for the government cloud. We're opening up a couple other data centers in the cloud. We want to make sure that you have the ability to decide where you want to put your workload. And with the Class B IP address, we basically give each of the 4 2 pairs, each one gets a /7 or /18. We want to make sure that you have administrators that know what they're doing, and then keep your stakeholders up to date, because the last what usually derails things is if you don't talk to your network guys and then you go and ask them for a VPN connection. They're like, what are you doing? So keep those guys in the loop. And what we hope to do is make it so that conversation is a really confident one where you're telling them, this is how we're securing our environment. So some common issues, moving things around when you didn't mean to, deleting things when you didn't mean to, having good reporting of the environment. If you guys haven't seen the Power BI reporting, it's pretty amazing. I think I might be able to show a quick demo of that. Let's see. I'll tee that up in a second, but the Power BI reporting gives you really robust capabilities into seeing where you're spending your money. So this is an architectural overview of what the foundation is trying to establish. Is that here you are as a customer, you got yourself a new Azure enrollment. If you got a government enrollment, it would be separate from your commercial enrollment. And when you go down the line, you basically say, here's my government enrollment. I may want to segregate my my departments out by agency. So if it's a statewide deployment, like state of Colorado or state of Texas, each agency in the state gets their own department. And then within that department, we kind of give you two high-level accounts. One's managed infrastructure. So this is like, hey, this stuff's under change management. You can't just do whatever you want in this environment. But we also give the ability to say you can have a sandbox environment. And for those guys, it's like saying, I got a really hotshot developer. He's got a really good idea. She's got a really good idea. Here's a sandbox. Go prove it out. And then once it's working, then you can incorporate that into your managed world. But it's a way to really enable your young go-getters out there to say, hey, I can give you an environment and not have them lose their enthusiasm, but at the same time not sacrifice security or outages to your production environment. The reason we do these 6 subscriptions, a subscription is a container for costs. So if you think of your bill as just kind of this hierarchy of department, account, and subscription, those are the 3 higher levels. And the other thing about a subscription is it's a security barrier. So if you have high business impact data, the administrators of that subscription could be completely different than your production subscription administrators. And where we put your domain controllers is in services, and where we put your pre-production world, and where we put your storage. And Visual Studio Team Services is also just kind of another, it's more there just for a billing requirement. For some reason, your developer who owns your Visual Studio Team Services site has to be a subscription admin. So we just gave them their own little box to manage who gets Visual Studio licenses. And our goal here in each one of these is really for financial reporting and for security. So, we put storage separate for like your hybrid storage, your backup and recovery. And our thought is that if you're an admin of high business impact and you're putting your backups in storage, the storage subscription, you can't make an accidental corruption because you wouldn't have permissions across these subscriptions. Like if you did this great script to go clean something up and you accidentally deleted all your backups because you had access to them, our goal is to say we don't want to let you have that kind of access. So we put these different containers out there to segregate who could do what. Same thing with your domain controllers. You just don't want the VHD of your domain to be something that everybody has access to. So you kind of segregate it in its own role.
Hey, Maria, ¿qué tal?
So this presentation is available on that link, and you can kind of read through why we did some of it. Here's kind of the look of the hierarchy of the subscriptions and how your bill will look. The next thing is about how you do your subscriptions in subnets. So each one of these subscriptions has, we put denoted what IP space it would have. So services would have a /21 IP space, storage would have a /21, HBI would have a /20. So you as a network administrator, or if you're talking to your network and security stakeholders, they would be able to see clearly what IP space went with what workload, and they could do they could basically look at the bottom of it and decide what kind of access control list they could apply to it. So like what we would say is, since we know that this /20 address is for preprod, having an ACL on premise that says this preprod can only get to other preprod environments on premise will really help secure that you couldn't have a rogue script where someone's printing checks in the SAP test system, print real checks. And the same thing is that if you're running a script there, it can't corrupt prod because there's no gateway between those. It's kind of the idea is that prod can reach into preprod, but preprod can't reach into prod. And that concept of going from a higher to lower is allowed, just going from a lower to higher is not allowed. We kind of thought through all of these security groups and the security barriers that we give you out of the box. So we're going to help you with denial of services. We're going to help you by enabling anything to have an endpoint exposed to the internet. Now we're going to start saying we're going to give you virtual network isolation. So in the beginning of the cloud, people would say, hey, we've got a cloud as long as you use our IP space. Now we've totally virtualized that. You can use whatever 10 addresses you want, whatever RFC 1918 or public addresses you want, and it's totally isolated from other VNets. So you could really get as granular as you want in your design. Network security groups and user-defined routing and virtual network appliances. When we enabled two NICs on a VM last spring, it really enabled our partners like Cisco and Barracuda and F5 to come up with great virtual appliances. So if you're used to using Cisco, you can lay Cisco on top of this. If you're used to using F5s, you can now put F5s out there and force your networks to use those network appliances. And then way here in the middle where it's super protected is your Azure deployments, and we give you different internal networks to deploy those on. So it's not so much that we're giving you IP space, it's that we're giving you containers like web app database, user tiers, DMZs that you can put your workloads on. There's a couple of links in here too along the way that says, hey, here's the best practices and everything. So then you get into hybrid networking, our VPNs. Here's the identity pattern, 2 domain controllers, Azure Active Directory Connect server and ADFS server. We do these network security groups to make it so that the DMZ can't be accessed, or the non-DMZ servers can't be accessed from the internet because of web application proxies. We do virtual private networking to get your connection from on-premise, and then we talk about advanced threat analytics to really help show to your security stakeholders that by having advanced threat analytics right next to your domain controllers in the cloud, you're going to know proactively if there's any threats in your environment. Traditionally, threats in your environment aren't detected for like 260 days, and now you can detect threats almost immediately with ATA. So now we talk about commercial and government. A lot of public sector workloads are public, so you can put them in a commercial cloud, and then some of them are MAG. This is kind of a depiction of what the Azure government Active Directory is, and it's in orange, and it's totally isolated. I equate it to best practices for domains where you have your normal user ID for doing traffic or for doing your email, but you have a privileged account for admin access, and that's kind of what the orange is it's saying that you'll have your own identity for managing Azure Active Directory government, and then the purple is all of the commercial side of it, so you can have that single sign-on experience with your Office 365 government or your Office 365 commercial and what have you. So this is usually a topic to just help explain how identity works in Azure Active Directory government. And then the rest of this presentation is really just how you do it. So it's to train the partners that says, hey, here's all this intellectual property, here's the rules, or here's the implementation guide for it. So it talks about VNet designs, how you do build sheets, who our partners are, what the statement of work looks like, how you do storage accounts, how you do virtual networks. Things that are out of scope is that because site-to-site VPNs require things outside of Azure, we basically put all of the building blocks in place for it, but we kind of leave that up to the customer's network admin to actually do the last step of it. Doing the DC promo is also another kind of, we want that to be the customer's responsibility, because you don't want to give a partner, for instance, you wouldn't want to give them domain admin access just to do this engagement. And then express route, same thing, is that's usually one of those long polls. It takes 45 days or something. So, we'll get all the things ready for these, and we'll coach you through getting these things done. But it's just one of those things that we want to make sure that the customer knows that they have a role in it. This is a link that I use all the time just to kind of get through, how do I get to my enterprise portal? How do I get to my MAG, which is Microsoft Azure Government portal, my Mac portal, my Azure Management. So anyway, this is all the links. How do I access Azure? So, I got PowerShell. I got, what our goal is to really say, you can access Azure any way you feel comfortable doing it. So JSON, command line interfaces, PowerShell, portals, we give you every way to do it. Different tips on how to get to each of these portals. We also give you different ways to look at your storage. Storage is one of those, in my mind, one of those no-brainers on using cloud storage. We're really racing to the bottom for cost. It's such a commodity these days. So for you to put backups on tapes anymore is pretty crazy, considering that a gigabyte of storage is less than a penny in Azure right now. So gives you a good way to look at it, how you set up PowerShell, how you, and then this is continuous improvement. We've recently implemented ARM, which is Azure Resource Model, in the government cloud. So we're taking all of our classic scripts and making them into ARM scripts, making them so that when you go to that GitHub repository, you can do branches off of it and get all the updates, updating these best practices and everything. Operation Management Suite, huge capability that we've invested a lot of time and effort in. So System Center is, what we started with as a company, and that's evolved into Operation Management Suite. Talks about the capabilities of OMS and why we recommend it out of the gate with the Azure Foundation. And once you have OMS, you're going to see these great reports of the availability and the capabilities that you have in Azure as well as on-premise. And for that matter, on any other cloud provider that you install the agent on. If you have customers that already have, or if you are a customer that already has Azure deployed in the standard or classic model, we have tools to migrate it to ARM. This is a nice talking slide to say, hey, this is what Azure's got. It's really easy to use. This guy did a nice talk on Channel 9. Talked about why you need to protect your network. This is a quick walkthrough of how you would define a network security group. Gartner has really looked at Microsoft as being a leader in the cloud, and these 14 leaderships, top quadrant leaderships, shows that we are here to stay. We are making the investments. As a consumer of Azure Cloud, you guys should feel confident that you chose the right cloud. I'm making a list of all the partners that will deploy Azure for you, or the Azure Foundation for you, and then the tools that we have. If you want to look at the total cost of ownership, or if you want to look at trying to get some investment dollars to offset the cost of the 2-week engagement that we expect this to cost. There's Yammer groups for partners to join and talk through it. And then if you want to find available tenant names for your new tenant. And then That's it. So I went through it really quickly just so I could leave time and see if there's any, questions or if you want me to go more deeply into something else. So let's see, the source of that Gartner slide, I think I have it in the presentation. Let me get it.
So that was a lot of content there. So to customers and to Microsoft's employees, is there a specific area you want Will to drill into?
Where did I get that Gartner slide?
Maybe just as an idea, if it's not putting you too much on the spot, Will, I wonder if you have an Azure environment that has been sort of established using this pattern to maybe just show what some of this looks like in practice a little bit in terms of sort of separating out accounts and subscriptions, separating out network layers, things like that, just to put a little bit more of a face to it.
Yeah, I do, and one of the things that's tough about it is that the government cloud is a little harder to get subscriptions to. So just so I don't act like it's a bait and switch, I do want to just say that this is the commercial cloud. But all of the stuff has been deployed in a number of states. So like state of New Mexico has done it, state of Louisiana is doing it, state of Texas is doing it. State of Colorado is doing it. So this is a pattern that's been laid down on the government cloud a number of times. Interesting. Actually, I went to the government portal by accident. And the other thing is, I'm not the enterprise admin for Microsoft's enrollment. So with that said, there's a couple of things that I'm not allowed to do. So the highest level access I can get is at the account portal. So if you kind of look at this, and that's something that probably everybody else has a little struggle with, is that you're really limited on what you see if you're not the enterprise administrator. So as the enterprise administrator, there's probably 2 or 3 people. We haven't introduced a new role in the enterprise administrator to give you read-only access to people. So what that helps with is it says, we send the welcome letter for a new Azure enrollment to the notification contact for the enterprise agreement with Microsoft, and that's usually a business person, right? And they usually don't know how to click through all this stuff and configure it. So what we'd recommend is we'd say, hey, why don't you get a technical guy that can at least get read-only access and help guide you through this. And if you're a partner delivering it, what you would do is you'd probably sit down with them. And so this is a joint venture that we have with Vexel. So it's just an example. When this comes up, it'll show that I'm an account administrator, but I'm not I'm a department administrator, but I'm not an accountant administrator. When I look here, you'll see all of my subscriptions internally. And so what I've tried to do here is say, here's my SLG managed storage services, prod, pre-prod, and how it does impact. When you look at a subscription, our goal here, when you go through the pattern, the account administrator that you set up is by default the subscription administrator. It's a special role called a service administrator, and you can edit that here. So if you say edit subscription details, it's this role that is that role. And so we recommend like making that a service account in case Will leaves, the whole place doesn't fall apart, and you can keep everything going. And if you think of that service account as like a privileged access control account where you check out the ID if you need to go make a new resource or another subscription. Otherwise, you just use this ID for just the initial setup, and then keep it in a safe place in your directory to check out when you need to do something special. And then going back down this way, the subscriptions that you have, let me see, you have two different portals to look at it, so let me just show you both. And I have to say our portals aren't the fastest. Here she comes. And the one I'm working on right now for the state of Texas is to do an entire overlay of virtual appliances. So I've been spending a lot of my time on the ARM stuff. So here's my 5 subscriptions. Here's the most important one of this is the services one, because that's where the identity, or at least for the foundation, is. That's where the only workload is. So when you consider when laying this down, all of the other subscriptions and the network security groups and the subnet definitions and the user-defined routing, all those things have absolutely no cost to them. It's just metadata. So when you look at this, when you look at the services subscription, you'll see that there's, I think I can just limit this to, yeah. So this is just the services subscription and what we have deployed there. So you get this idea of I got domain controllers, I got Active Directory domain services, ADFSs, proxies, the VNets. When you do a VNet, the IP address is associated to a location. So I got one for West 1 and West 2. And you go into these guys and, you know, it talks about, hey, I got the gateways that I need to have between them. So just recently we did VNet peering. So before I used to have a gateway that connected my West services to my West 2 services. So if I ever wanted to put domain controllers in each, they could replicate. Let's see here, what else we got? I don't think I have this. Oh yeah. So the fun thing about this example is that I deployed it with all the script in that GitHub for Classic, which took a lot of craziness, because if you remember in Classic, it's like everything was XML based and you had to parse that XML file and change all the IP addresses and everything. And now what we've done is we've said export that Classic and make it ARM. And so it worked out pretty good. It was actually pretty seamless, and it just transitioned all that network gear over to the right data center in ARM. Let's see. And if you guys haven't used ARM, it's so cool. It's got a little learning curve to it. I used to be the data center guy plugging in cables, so now I'm plugging in JSON lines. Challenger on my team, he's really good at it, so I reach out to these guys when I need help. And we would expect the partners also to have their own view of the world. And if you look at it from, this is that Visual Studio Online. So I don't know if you guys have seen the advancements in Visual Studio. If you have Visual Studio subscriptions, you guys all get this, and you get the ability to create your own team services. And that's really helped me out with my projects, because now I can host them in Visual Studio, do configuration or infrastructure as code, if you will, and check my stuff in and make it so I can make a new server in a JSON document, check it in, and then that server gets deployed. And you can make that as automated as you want. You know, if that means opening up change tickets or anything you want. So I have a few different sites here. You guys can open up as many projects as you want. This one here is a CSA sandbox, is the one that's associated to this subscription. So once you get, let's see, I'm in the wrong. And once you get into here, you would, you'd associate Visual Studio to this, and then now you can start assigning licenses to your, project managers or people that may not have a Visual Studio license. That's a whole nother talk. We could go in there, so you can say a link to an existing, and it'll show you if you haven't already linked one. So this is our project here. What we hope to do is make this example available to everybody. So like if you wanted to, if you were a partner and you kind of said, hey, I wanted to show a working environment, I don't see any risk of me giving partners, identities in this specific domain and changing this from being Microsoft.onmicrosoft.com to being, like the Azure Foundation.onmicrosoft.com, so that everybody could have this working environment. And because I have it all checked in as code, I could just blow it away and redeploy it, and everybody would still be fine. So the code that this all has is based on, of all things, an Excel spreadsheet. So this metadata tab right here shows the spreadsheet. And so when you download this, open it up and you'll see kind of this concept of saying, if I start from left to right, I give you directions too. So like there's step-by-step instructions of what do you do at what portal, what buttons do you click, how do you create your 5 subscriptions, how do you get connected to PowerShell. And then when you get to the departments, the idea is saying, hey, if I have SLG in both the government cloud and in the commercial cloud, I would want to have 4 departments for that, 2 managed and 2 sandboxes. And the idea is that all this stuff carries through as far as metadata. So if you change this to be, instead of SLG, call it, TOSA. So you can just change all that, and it just carries through with all your names down the row. What your subscription names will be. What happens with a lot of subscriptions is they all get named the same thing, and no one knows where their workloads are. So having a naming convention so everybody knows what subscription stuff is deployed in. The other thing that I've noticed is that having a partner record is a really great incentive to have a good partnership with your customers, and the customers to have a good partnership with your partners. Is that customer record is a very powerful incentive that partner is going to do a good job for you and have your best interests in mind. What sites you're going to deploy to, kind of the idea that says, hey, you're going to have this connectivity to the customer site. The government cloud is where these 2 go to, and then the other half is the commercial cloud if you want both. How we carve up the Class B IP space, and really the only thing you got to do to configure this for a customer is change column N and O. So you just change this 10.130 to whatever Class B address they want. Then it goes into subdividing that out into all the subnets, so that you have containers for all those network security group policies that you want, so that the web layer can't talk to the database or what have you. What local networks you want to talk back to. Here's the network security groups. Our concept for the network security groups was that every subnet will get a network security group, and then out of the gate we would do basically a rule per group that says, if you're a DMZ, you can get port 443 in from the internet. If you're not a DMZ, you can't get anything in from the internet. And you can definitely get as granular as you want. And the way that the foundation puts that out there is you have a group to put however many rules you want to do. So, we got the rules for each subnet out of the gate, so that you're pretty armed to not hurt yourself. If you have my scenario that I always use is, I got a new database admin. He says, I'm going to throw this database out in Azure. You authorize it, they put it on a database subnet, and then they're like, well, we need to expose it to the world. I'm going to put a endpoint on there and expose the database, the listener, to the internet. Well, they could do that, but your network security group that you've laid down in the foundation would prevent that access. Storage accounts, storage accounts are just like LUNs on premise. You get IOPS, you get certain IOPS, so we help you design your storage accounts so that you have enough storage accounts to get the performance that you need to have, segregating storage between OS drives and data drives and premium storage, and giving you that kind of guidance. The users and the roles and the rollback, RBAC, I think that we, again, I feel we've done a really good job where we go through the roles that are out of the box, and we can now do all of this in one subscription. So I often argue with my friends in Redmond that says, hey, I'm proposing 5 subscriptions. They're like, you can do it all in one subscription. And really, it's only to segregate your workloads. Technically, you can do role-based access control down to the whatever level of detail you need to do. So even if you only have one prod subscription, you can have all your admins playing safely in that same world. And again, contributors basically can't add and delete stuff, but they can change stuff. So that's always a good role to assign to people. If you're the DBA, if you're the subscription owner, make a resource group for somebody, make them a contributor, and then let them go. And then the last part of it is the server build sheets. So our goal and our future here is that everyone's coming up with great patterns, and the cloud's enabled these great patterns to help you come up with things. Like you'll see in our marketplaces, you can deploy a CSR server, a Cisco CSR server, with a couple clicks of a button. What we want to do is say, if you deployed the Azure Foundation, we can do server build sheets, and we'll get the JSON script to make it so that these 8 servers that we have defined just create the JSON document required to deploy them in the environment. And what we on my working copy of this that I haven't published yet, we just add a column on the side here that outputs the JSON to say, hey, design your workload in the spreadsheet. You'll get an idea of the cost and everything. Not only that, you'll get good documentation about what's in your environment, and then the metadata to generate the scripts is out there. We used to have the costs in here, but the costs are changing so rapidly. Just go to the Azure calculator now. And then we have the metadata in here so that you can, basically see if you got an A9 server, how many cores you have. And so for the most part, it's on these D series and stuff, A's and D's. And let me see what else is on here. Yeah, the one I'm doing now is really more geared towards, this virtual appliance. So I think that would also just be another version of the Azure Foundation. This one is with no network appliances, and the one that I'll be publishing next is kind of that idea that says, hey, I want to use Cisco or I want to use Barracuda. How do I modify this foundation to do network virtual appliances? Still didn't find that link for that Gartner report. I'm sure I can find it with a quick search.
All right. Any other topics for Will to drill into? Any other questions? Will, if someone's interested in Azure Foundation, what's the best way for a customer to actually reach out and get this going?
I would say that you can definitely reach out to me directly. I'm keeping pretty good track of it, and then the list of partners, we're going to keep a matrix of that out there. I think it's going to be us probably helping with that. Us reaching out to customers that have new subscriptions and introducing that customer to a partner. But if there's any customers on the line that would like to have a partner, yeah, I could definitely help with that introduction. And Steve, you might have some ideas too. I'm not sure if we have a wide list of partners. The best way for us to get that list to the customers, there's a lot of customers, I guess. So
yeah,
put it on.
And that's a good point. It's worth mentioning. You probably heard Will mention this early in the call. Is that he's been working with a list of partners to train them on this this prescriptive architecture. So I guess if you have a partner that you're working with and you're interested in this, then by all means, loop them in, ping myself or Will or your Microsoft contact, whoever that might be, because we would like to work with the partners and train as many partners as possible to actually get this out. Because the thing that I really like about this is that this is a really well thought through way to deploy your Azure footprint, and it addresses a lot of concerns that you might organically figure out on your own, but Will's been doing this for a while, and so it's got a lot of best practices that are rolled into it, and by adopting this, it sort of solves a lot of problems that you might run into down the road, especially from a security standpoint and from a sort of a deployment and ease of use standpoint as well.
Yeah, that's a great summary, Steve. Thank you. It's like you try to think of doing this, and it'd be like, you could take another year and a half to kind of come up with it, or you could say, hey, our team of architects has really all put our heads together and documented what the things that we're seeing in the field to your benefit.
Yep. So, any other questions? We've still got 10 minutes left, 8 minutes. Any other follow-ups or for future calls, topics that you'd like to drill into from this?
I can show. I got a Power BI report I can show. So if you guys did have access to your enterprise admin portal, one of the tabs on it is billing. And so like right here under reports, I don't know if I'll have access to it. And then it's got Power BI reporting. It'll tell you exactly how to do it. But since I don't have access, only the enterprise admin has access, there'd be another link right up here. And you would just guide your enterprise admin guy to say, hey, go click that link. We gave directions in the presentation. I think this is for a pre-production environment that we have, that I have access to it. Sometimes when I'm presenting, my mouse automatically clicks. Come on. Keeps hiding. So it basically shows up as Azure Enterprise, but the way you set it up is you say get data, services, and then search for Azure, and it's Azure Enterprise Services. And that's how you get it. And then once you get the data, here's kind of an example of what it looks like. Is because you set it up the way with the foundation, you get an idea that says, hey, for shared services, I'm using this much money. For databases, I'm using this. And you kind of get through this, because subscription is this higher level, and you categorize your workload accordingly, You can look by month and just drill down into particular months. You can look at what services are consuming most of your investment on this next tab. And so as a as an owner of your financial world, if you're the customer and you're on the business side and you're pitching Azure, you can basically have really professional, detailed reports about where you're spending your money. And if you were to say, hey, I got this same capability on premise, I'd say I'd applaud you, because most people don't have any idea how much their spend on premise is. And that's one of the huge benefits of the cloud. So you can look at these categories, and if you guys haven't seen Power BI, then it is a great example of how Power BI can really enable you to make database decisions. Shows you what data centers you're using and stuff like that. All right, Steve, I think I've bored these guys.
All right, well, it is Friday, late on a Friday. Any last minute questions for Will? Going once, going twice. All right, so hey, thank you everybody for attending this call. My ask to the customers is, if you have any other questions, please feel free to either forward them to me or Will, or to your Microsoft contact, whoever that might be. Also with any topics or suggestions for topics for future calls. And also, if you're interested in getting the link for the recording to this, if you want to share that with folks, we'll make that available to you. So once again, thank you very much, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everyone.